Some say Chinese is one of the most difficult languages in the world, and learning it is almost impossible.
So learning Chinese, the most difficult thing.
非常非常非常非常非常难
So I'm sort of tone deaf. I can't really hear them.
I think the cultural mindset is the biggest complication for
The
us.
grammar.
知吃思诗都还难
It's just complicated. So much.
Only because you're not learning it in the right way. Why not try Takeaway Chinese, where you can take some Chinese away and experience progress day by day. Takeaway Chinese, we will promise you a difference.
Welcome to Takeaway Chinese. I'm Nian Hongling, and joining me today, Steve Hatherley. Hello, Steve.
中午好
Oh, hey, you've learned something new, not from the previous episode.
So yes, I'm moving through different parts of the day, of the 24-hour day, and picking up an expression or two along the way. So
That's very nice.
yeah, so good morning, 早上好, and good afternoon, 中午好. So yeah, I'm not ready for good evening just yet. Maybe next time.
晚上好.
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 Perfect.
See, look, this show wastes no time. We just dive straight into the lesson.
Yes, and the funny thing is when it comes to learning of a language, picking up certain expressions and phrases in your daily life is almost always the best way because they're useful. You're actually using them in your real conversations with people around you, and also gives you the sense of achievement. It feels like you're actually learning and using, and the feeling of rewarding is quite important as well.
Absolutely.
And Steve has only been here for less than 2 months. You're only starting learning the language, and you're already making progress, which makes me very, very happy.
Baby steps, but I'm happy with baby steps. You know, you can't learn everything in a day. As long as you're adding maybe a few pieces of vocabulary and a few expressions, or maybe learn one grammar structure a week, something like that. Slow and steady wins the race. That's the English expression, right?
Yes. And in Chinese, we also say 不积跬步，无以至千里；不积小流，无以至江海.
That's a lot longer than the English expression.
That's actually a good example of some future points I'd like to make about the Chinese language. That is, we have a really long history. The language has a really long history. We've been using it for thousands of years, which means there are a lot of set phrases. There are a lot of sentences from poems, from classics that we can still use, still cite today. And for a common Chinese speaker, these things are not that complicated, but they are actually created hundreds and thousands of years ago. So the grammar might be a little bit different. The way of saying them might be a little bit different. There can even be stories behind these sayings, but no worries. We'll get there when we get there. We're only in the first initial stage. That is, we are starting this new mini-series showcasing different foreign friends on the show with different level of proficiency with regard to the Chinese language. And we're starting with Steve Hatherley here, showcasing what it's like to be someone who's freshly off the boat, who has a great interest in learning the language, but knows not that much. And if you are at that stage as well, no worries. We are giving you the at least necessary help to get started. So for our dear listeners, if you're interested in Chinese culture and you want to get a grip on the Chinese language, then this is the show for you. Stick with us for 30 minutes and you soon see the rewards. And for more fun Chinese learning, follow our Facebook page, Learn Chinese, to watch many fun videos and live streams. But now, let's provide you with some free Chinese for takeaway. So for the previous episode, we've learned to the very basic yet necessary way of introducing yourself. Do you still remember how to do that, Steve?
I am Steve is 我是 Steve. Call me Steve this is just another way of introducing yourself. 我叫 Steve, or you can flip those two words, 叫我 Steve. I also learned nice to meet you. This one's a little bit difficult, and I'd like to ask for a review lesson on this one very quickly, please. Nice to meet you, happy to see you is 很高兴 见到你.
It's actually perfect.
Oh, thank you. And then one more fun one. This was the most fun one, I think. Lucky to meet you is 幸会. 幸会.
幸会,幸会.
You can say it
Yes,
twice or
you
3
say it
times
twice,
if you want
yes.
to. Oh, it was specifically twice.
Mostly twice.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah, so those are the things that I picked up on episode 1.
Yes, so that's episode 1 for Steve, and maybe for those of you who are starting to learn the language. And one thing I am really commonly asked by people who do not know how to speak Chinese here in China is, how do I say I don't speak Chinese?
It's a really useful, ironically perhaps, a really useful thing to know. And I think whenever you go to another country, it's good to say, I'm sorry. I don't know why I think like this, but always apologize first and say, I'm sorry, I don't speak your language. Because in my experience of living in cultures where English was not the first language, if you say something in their native language, even something small, sometimes people will think, oh, you speak Korean, you speak French, you speak Italian, you speak Chinese, when in fact, the thing that you said is the only thing that you know. And all of a sudden, they will start talking to you
Really fast.
very quickly and expecting you to understand. So that's why a really useful expression to know is, I'm sorry, I don't speak your language. In this case, I'm sorry, I don't speak Chinese. And the reason I wanted to know this one is because this happened to me at the elevator here in the building the other day. On the first floor, there was a very friendly gentleman downstairs, and he looked at me and he said, ni hao. I said, ni hao. And then all of a sudden, he just started talking. And I didn't know how to say, oh, I'm sorry, I don't speak Chinese. I didn't know how to say that. So today I'm going to learn that one.
Aw, look at you already making friends even though you don't speak the language yet.
Exactly. And I realized at that moment, oh, I need to know how to say this right now. You can use this expression everywhere. You can use it at a restaurant if the server is asking you questions. You can use it in a taxi if the taxi driver is talking to you. And beyond that, I just think it's a really polite thing to say to people in a language where they speak it fluently. I'm sorry, I don't speak this. And I always think apologizing first is a really polite thing to do.
Yes, and also it shows that even you are not speaking the language just yet, you're making an effort by at least learning how to say, I don't know how to say this language in the language. So yes, to start with, since you've talked about apologizing helps a lot, let's learn to say, I'm sorry in Chinese as well. That is the most standard way is 对不起.
对不起.
Yes.
Okay.
对不起.
对不起. I've heard 对 means like right.
It can also mean towards.
Okay. So there's various meanings for this because in my daily life so far in China, this is one of the words that I've heard a lot. Because you pay attention, right? When people are talking and you don't know what they're saying, but you recognize the same thing you've heard 100 times. 对对对对对对对. I've heard it a lot. I'm hearing it again here, but it's a different meaning in a different context.
It's exactly the kind of situation because we talked about there are a lot of characters in the Chinese language. Actually, there are around 3,000 very commonly used Chinese characters in your daily life. So basically, if you have 3,000 Chinese characters, you would be able to read newspapers here in China. That's the level. Yet, there are more than 50,000 Chinese characters in the Chinese language, more than that. However, the good news is, as long as you start your first 300 Chinese characters, you would find that they're a little bit like building blocks you can put together, and many of the characters are basically two other characters that you can recognize being put together. So it gets easier after the first couple of hundreds. And the idea is, unlike in English, where alphabet, each letter, they're just letters. They're put together to mainly showcase the pronunciation of the word, and you have to remember each and every word. Actually, the Chinese character carries meaning already. They have meanings. Like you said, 对对对 actually means yes, 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 sure, you're right. Right, correct, something like that. And 对, this character itself, also carries the meaning of towards. It's saying or suggesting a certain kind of direction. So 对不起, 不, I'm sure that you hear 不 quite a lot as well.
I do, yeah. And 不 means it's the negative of like no or not, something like that. Delicious. I've learned that word before. 吃饭 means let's eat, right? But to say something tastes good, you say 好吃.
Yes.
And if you want to say something doesn't taste good, then you say 不好吃. So 不 is the negative that comes in the front of something.
Exactly. So 不 is also a very good example because 不, the character, not only the pronunciation, because we know a lot of characters share the same pronunciation, some with the same tone, some with different tones, but they share the same pronunciation. Whereas 不, the character, not the pronunciation, only has this one meaning. That is the negative sign of things. So this is an easy one. Whereas 对, at least now we have already figured out two meanings of 对. One is correct, the other is the direction. And 起, again, this is a character with a lot of different meanings. And here, 对不起, it's kind of like saying we don't match here. So you can imagine I'm saying I am not matching with you in a certain way. So here it's kind of like saying 对不起, I'm sorry because I'm not matching with your level in a certain way. Maybe I didn't contribute enough to this, or maybe I should have done this, but I didn't. Either way, this is me apologizing for being not as good as you at a certain aspect.
Now that's the full 100% explanation. But can we use 对不起 in every situation?
We can use it in every situation.
Where you want to say you're sorry.
Yes. The reason I'm explaining this is because I want to showcase that even for a word as common as I'm sorry, perhaps for those fluent Chinese learner or for those who are not Chinese native speakers, yet they already have this very high level of Chinese, maybe no one has explained to you why 对不起 means I'm sorry. But there actually is reasons, or there are ways to understand it. Because, for example, in a relatively more complicated situation, I can say things like 我哪里对不起你? So where I sorry you, if you translate them directly. Actually, what I'm saying is I've done everything. I don't think I deserve to be treated by you like this. I feel like I'm giving you all that I can. There's no place, no point in our relationship that I would apologize. So where? What is it that you feel like I need to apologize to you? Yet you do not translate it like that. So 我哪里对不起你? What did I do wrong? You might translate it like that.
Okay.
But if you understand 对不起 in the sense that 对不起 means there are two parties and they do not match, you kind of understand how come 我哪里对不起你 means where is that difference in our relationship? What does not match?
And because you don't match, it's your fault.
You're apologizing.
Then you are the one to say 对不起.
Yes.
Can you help me with the tone again, please? A little bit slowly.
对不起
对不起.
Perfect.
So the chi goes down and then up.
Up.
And the down and up, what tone number is that, please?
Number 3.
Number
it's the
3.
third tone.
Okay.
Okay, since you're asking that, I'd like to tell people about this quite a lot. Especially, this is the fact that even many Chinese native speakers, they neglect this tiny little pronunciation detail. That is, when we have the first tone, it is the same, the same. Yet, if you think about it in music notes, it's actually a 5-5. So there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1 going a little bit up than the previous. So 1 being the lowest, 5 being the highest. So the first tone is supposed to be a 5-5. So and the second tone is supposed to be a 3-5.
It's a combination of the different levels.
Yes.
Okay.
And the third tone is supposed to be a 2-1-4. So you actually finishes a little bit higher than you starts.
That's a really good way to explain it, I think, because being a native English speaker, this is one thing that makes Chinese such a challenge. It's a musical language. And I was thinking, maybe musicians have an easier time learning to speak Chinese than non-musicians do, or singers maybe, because they already understand those different types of tones. Yeah, so when you're learning Chinese, coming from being a native English speaker, it is one of the challenges. Because in my experience of learning to speak French when I was younger and learning to speak Korean when I got to that country, that this aspect of the language doesn't exist there. Languages can be musical. English can be musical as well. You can change your inflection in your sentence to change your meaning, but not to this degree.
Not in this way.
And it's hard to remember that because in Korean or in French, to use those as an example of, again, when you learn the word, you just have to learn the word. But here in Chinese, you have to learn the word and you have to learn the tones that go with it as well.
Yes, and I understand when you say you have tones, but it is to express certain emotions and certain points that you want to stress in a sentence. We have that too, but it's demonstrated in a different way. And to finish off with the tone, with the number, the different tone, the fourth tone is supposed to be go from up to down, and it's a 5-3. I find it funny because when I was a kid and start learning, again, Chinese, because you have Chinese lessons and you read articles, you would find some people reading Chinese articles meticulously, like a radio announcer. They just do it very beautifully. Some kids are a little bit off, but you don't know where they went wrong because each and every character sounds correct. But it turns out if you pronounce a first tone, that you're supposed to be using 5-5 to pronounce in a sentence instead of 5-5, you use, for example, 1-1, then it sounds a little bit weird with other characters putting together.
But people will still understand what you said.
They will.
Okay, this is really good to know because being a brand new student of Chinese, I was always worried about the tones because I've been told that they're really, really important. If you listen to different lessons from different wherever you're studying Chinese, they'll always talk about the tones right in the very beginning, right in episode 1, episode 2. They'll talk about the tones. So for me, I thought, oh, okay, I have to learn these perfectly. But now what you're saying is, yeah, you have to learn them because it's going to help you become a better speaker as you're improving your language skills. But you don't need to worry about it that much in the very beginning.
Definitely.
Okay,
there
good.
are actually a lot of dialects and a lot of accent in China, in different places, in different areas of the country. And actually, one way of pronouncing a language with a dialect is to change all the third tone to a second tone, or change all the fourth tone into a second tone or a third tone. So when certain people do that, it will change your accent to a different accent. It's a funny thing. You will notice that a bit later.
Okay, so let's say I'm walking down the street and I accidentally bump into a person and I want to say, oh, sorry about that. Sorry, I'm sorry. The proper pronunciation, very strict proper pronunciation would be 对不起.
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 Perfect.
But here's my question. In that moment where everything's happening very quickly, in English, I'd say, oh, sorry. Can I say, without worrying about the tone, can I say, oh, 对不起, 对不起?
Perfect.
Okay.
People will understand you.
Okay, good. This is great information to know because now I'm not as stressed about learning the exact tones just yet.
Yes.
Got it.
So that is 对不起, I'm sorry. And the next thing you want to say is, I don't speak Chinese. And there are multiple ways of doing that. You can.
I was hoping there was just one.
There are always different ways
Right.
of saying one thing.
Sure.
That's the beauty of the Chinese language, in my opinion. You can start by using the relatively easier one, that is 听不懂.
听
不
不.
懂.
There's boo.
Yes.
Again, right?
Uh-huh.
Don't. 听不
懂.
懂.
That is easy to speak because there are only 3 characters. Yet it does not precisely mean I don't speak Chinese. It actually means I don't understand.
Okay.
So
Okay.
听 is to listen to or to hear. And 不 we know is the negative sign. And 懂 is understand. So I heard you, but I don't understand.
Okay. So 对不起 听不懂.
That works.
Okay. But let's learn how to say, I don't speak Chinese. Let me ask you this question. In English, we always say I. But not every language does that. Korean, for example, na. In the beginning of a sentence where they want to express I or me, they don't say na. They don't use it. In Chinese, do you often say I at the beginning of a sentence?
We can, but we can also omit it.
Okay, good.
We have different ways of doing that.
Okay.
If you do not specify the subject of the sentence, then definitely either the subject is I, which can be omitted.
It's assumed.
Or the subject is mentioned in the previous sentence. So it can also be understood.
Okay.
So that's the general rule. And here you can say 我不会说中文.
Okay.
我 is the I. 不会 don't know how to, don't have the ability.
不会
说 is to speak.
说
中文 Chinese.
中文
Yes. So 我不会说中文 I don't speak Chinese. Because in Chinese, if you say 我不说中文, of course people will understand, you do not know how to do that. But the literal translation, the direct translation would be I don't speak Chinese, as if I have a problem with Chinese. I choose not to speak it.
Oh, that's different.
That's different. But again, I was saying if you have a foreign face and you say 我不说中文, they will not assume that you have a problem with Chinese.
Yeah, it's not like you're saying I refuse to speak Chinese.
Right?
Okay.
But the structure itself, the I don't do this itself can suggest that I don't do it because I choose not to do it instead of I don't know how to do it.
Okay, sure.
That is why I specified I don't know how or I can't speak Chinese. That is 我不会说中文. 会 is the ability suggesting kind of word.
Okay, so going back to the two examples, 对不起 is I'm sorry. 听不懂, that's the easy one, right?
Yeah, don't understand.
Yeah, I don't understand. But if you want to say more specifically, if you don't speak the language, then 对不起,我不会说中文.
Perfect. Actually, I think you have a talent here. You can pronounce the words relatively precise. I mean, the pronunciations are almost always perfect. The tone thing, we can work with it, but the pronunciation is quite good already.
Do you know what's really funny that I'm noticing? That, you're helping me with the tones and the rhythm of the sentence now. And because you're helping me, I can follow along. But when I'm out in public and I'm trying to practice these, I find myself just guessing at the tones and just trying to be musical in some way, hoping that it's right when I know it's obviously wrong.
It's not obviously wrong. I think you can remember them, especially after giving you the explanation of each tone actually should start from where if you're looking at a music note and stop at what place. I think it'll get easier.
Good.
It'll get easier.
Okay. One more time. 对不起,听不懂,对不起,我不会说中文.
Yes, that's actually perfect.
Okay.
And along those lines, if you want to communicate with people here in China, yet you do not really know any Chinese, even that you're learning really hard, one thing to do is to get out your phone, get a translator on your phone and start typing in whatever language you speak, and it can be translated into Chinese. And that is a really easy way to communicate if it's complicated conversation.
Yeah.
And what you want to do is to tell the other party that I'm going to do this. So you can say, wait a second, 等一等.
Wait a second.
Or just please wait.
Wait a second or please wait.
Yes, so 等 means to wait. Remember we talked about 幸会幸会. You repeat the word twice to lighten the tone. Actually, when there is a Chinese character or word that is already a verb and you want to say, I want you to do this, you can use that same logic. You can say 等等. It also means wait a minute.
Wait.
Wait, 等等.
Yeah.
Or you can use 等一等. So wait one wait.
Okay.
Right? It's like wait a bit, wait one wait. Or 等一下, wait for a moment. So these are simple ways of using one verb to form a sentence.
Okay, so let's learn those again. So wait a second was 懂
等
等.
Yes, perfect.
Okay, next.
等等.
等等 just means like wait.
But not with a lot of hustle and rush. It's like just wait. It's a very common way of saying wait with no wait kind of. Just like wait. 等等.
Is this polite?
Yes.
Okay. Situation. I'm at a restaurant and I'm trying to communicate with the waiter, but we get to a point where I can't say what I want to say. So I want to take out my phone and use the translator. And I want to let them know that I want them to wait for a second. Then I say, 等等.
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 Or I think 等等 is a bit hard to pronounce because you have 3 tones, 2 third tone together, which would actually involve a situation of changing the tone a little bit. We're going to get that point a little further down the road.
Yeah.
Yet, if you say 等一等, that's easier. So
That
let's
is
learn
easier.
等一等.
等一等.
Yes, 等一等 works.
等一等. Okay. 等一, not 一, it's just 一. 等一等.
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 Yes.
Okay.
And now you have mostly the important phrases you want to say to people about not knowing the language and wanting them to wait a little bit.
Yeah. And I want to say this to my fellow beginner students. When you're getting started, some pronunciations are going to be easy for you. Other pronunciations are going to be more difficult. But don't get frustrated with the words that you can't quite perfectly pronounce. That I'm guessing and I'm hoping will come a little bit later.
Yes.
My point is, don't get too stuck on something. If you're having trouble pronouncing it, just be aware of it and you can come back and address that later.
Exactly. And from today's examples, it's easier to see that actually when it comes to grammar, there are different rules, but I think the major one here in the Chinese language is that when it comes to a normal sentence, you use the subject, verb, object structure. For example, 我不会说中文. So 我 is I, 说 is the verb to speak. 中文 is Chinese. I speak Chinese. And you put 不会 there, meaning I do not know how to do that. And 我说中文, I speak Chinese. 我不说中文, I refuse to speak Chinese because I have a problem with the language. Just kidding. 我不会说中文, I don't know how to speak the Chinese language. And here it's easy to see already when we're putting the negative sign in the sentence, you put it directly in front of the verb. And the situation with the Chinese question sentences is that instead of learning a whole new way of asking a question, what you do is add a simple ma at the end of your sentence.
That's been the easiest part to kind of comprehend about, when just learning about the language in general, is that at the end of it, if you want to make a question, you just put ma at the end, and it turns it into a question.
Yeah, so we already know how to say I speak Chinese, 我说中文, or I don't speak Chinese, 我不会说中文. How do you say, do you speak Chinese?
你会说中文吗?
Perfect. That's already a perfect Chinese sentence.
Yeah, because I took out 我, which is I, and I replaced it with 你, which is you, and then took out the 不, because that means don't. We don't need that here.
Or you're being very mean and very to someone.
Because you can't ask that question, right? You don't speak Chinese.
You can actually ask that question. You can say...
That would be... Oh, let me try. 你不会说中文吗?
It's like you being very mean. So
like,
for someone
are you
who's...
dumb?
Yes.
Yeah, right. I get it. Yeah, it's the same in English if you say it like that.
Yeah, I remember hearing this anecdote of some editor in a office saying, is English your second language, to a native English speaker. So that's me. And it's
sarcasm.
The same sarcasm. It's the same idea. If you say 你不会说中文吗? Don't you speak Chinese? What's wrong with you? It's not the kind of language we want to actually teach.
But it's good to know that it's out there.
It's out there.
It's at your disposal if you ever want to use it. That's up to you.
And as long as you learn the grammar, you can actually make your own sentences You might not know the meaning behind it. You might ask someone, don't you speak Chinese in a very impolite way? Yet the structure is right. The sentence is actually right. At least grammatically correct. Grammatically. At least grammatically correct. So we know that these are the basic rules in a language, in the Chinese language. Yet when it comes to more detailed grammar rules, definitely we have some. For example, in the Chinese language, we do not really have articles. We have quantity words, but we do not need specifically an article in front of a noun.
Okay.
Because in English, you say, do you have a pen? You have to have the in the sentence, the article. In Chinese, you say, 你有笔吗? You have pen.
Yeah.
吗?
Yeah, it's much more compact.
Yes.
Yeah, English is annoying in that way, isn't it? And even I know that as a native English speaker. Articles are a pain in the backside. And not having to remember where and when to put them. It's like in French or I think Spanish too. The masculine and the feminine, depending on which, the le and the la, you have to remember which one goes with which. It's the same with articles. So to know that you don't have to worry about articles in Chinese is really comforting.
Yes. Another thing is there's no gender in Chinese. Not saying that there's no gender in China, but in the Chinese language, there's no gender when it comes to nouns, when it comes to verbs. You do not have to change your verbs based on different gender of the noun in the language as well. So relatively speaking, these are some smaller rules that you can pick up when you're learning the language.
Yeah, this is all good information to know when you're starting out for sure.
Yes, and again, I would suggest those who are only starting to start by picking up certain expressions and ways of saying things instead of trying to use the relatively limited vocabulary and fit them into the language equation, because that's even harder.
Yes, but if you do get stuck, just say 对不起听不懂 or 对不起我不会说中文
Perfect. And that brings us to the end of today's Takeaway Chinese. I'm Yuan Honglin with Steve Hatherley here in the studio. For more fun episodes of the show, you can visit our website at radio.cjtn.com and go to the column podcast. You can also listen to the show and read the script there. Find us wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. Just search for Takeaway Chinese. Don't forget to leave your questions, comments, and a 5-star rating. 感谢收听，我们下次再见。
再见